So the truth is this video, as much as it is a video that I wish I had watched when I was a younger version of myself. So to give a little bit of background, I'm 40 years old today. I spent the last decade building an HVAC company, which I just recently sold, and I'm now transitioning full-time into real estate for a lot of different reasons, mainly tax purposes, because it's one of the few industries where you can pay 0% taxes, because in my opinion, I'm hardcore libertarian. I do not believe in paying taxes, because if you look at the way the government works, all they're gonna do is take your money and waste it. I don't think there's any virtue in paying your fair share, and in fact, I think your fair share is actually zero. And the company I built was an HVAC company, and I went into HVAC, not because it was my passion, it was just I was 29 years old, I f***ed up my 20s and tried a lot of different industries. I had done illicit industries as well. I was pot mule at one point and got caught with a lot of weed, and from my perspective, I viewed it as I'm just like a bootlegger. Back in the day when they were moving whiskey barrels, I viewed it as an opportunity I couldn't pass up, because I was like one day gonna tell my grandkids about how granddaddy was a bootlegger and moving marijuana back when it was illegal. And that was a dumb mistake, obviously, because it ended up almost costing me my life, literally. And there was a lot of other reckless behaviors I did in my 20s. I'm not gonna tell you to not live recklessly when you're in your 20s, because if you're a 20-year-old dude, your prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain that developed to control your impulses, so you're not as impulsive when you're 30 as you are when you're 20, because that develops and it doesn't really stop developing until 25. I don't think mine developed until maybe I was 30, because I was still pretty impulsive. But my whole point is some of those things set me back financially. And obviously I was trying to get ahead, I was doing different things. But if I was starting from scratch and I wanted to not necessarily play it safe, but I wanted to come up with a plan, right? What am I gonna do today to make money to be financially free by 30? There's a few things that I would do. The first thing I would do is I would stop chasing women. There's a quote, which is hard when you're in your 20s because you're horny as and that's all you want to do is party, meet women, do whatever. But one of my favorite quotes that I heard is, you'll never lose women chasing money, but you'll always lose money chasing women. That's not exactly true, because if I started chasing money exclusively right now, I would probably lose my wife and my daughter, because I would never see them and they wouldn't want that kind of lifestyle. My wife wouldn't. My daughter's 18 months old, and so she doesn't really have a say in the matter. But that's not the lifestyle I want either. I want to spend time with them. But when you're 20 and you're single, if you have the choice and you don't have those obligations, then you can focus on making money instead. Well, how would I focus on making money in my 20s? Well, the first thing I would do is I would try to set goals that I found believable. A lot of the mistakes that I see people making now when I look at them, I talk to kids sometimes when I was building my company. I took that from 0 to 3 million in revenue before I finally sold it and got rid of it. And I sold it for 7 figures, but I'm not here to talk about that today. I can talk about that later. And it's a small flex. I mean, there's lots of people that have done much bigger exits with their company. If you want to follow a guy who tell you how to exit a business for multiple 8 figures or more, follow Alex Hormozi. That's a mentor that I look up to, and I've been to some of his events. I went to acquisition.com and got to meet him and ask him some questions while I was scaling my company. And I actually sold my company a little prematurely because I wanted to get out. I was just burnt out and it wasn't my passion, and it became clear to me that it was a waste of my life. So that's why I sold. But I talk to young adults often, and I remember one time this one particular kid who I met, we kind of hit it off because he listened to a lot of Gary Vee, and Gary Vee always talks about perspective and having perspective and being willing to put in the work. And then I asked this kid, you know, we were talking about goals and stuff, and he said his goal was to make his first billion by 30. And I kind of rolled my eyes and I was like, wow, you're retarded. Okay, cool. So you're not going to make, not only are you not going to make $1 billion by 30, you're probably not going to make $1 million by 30, because you're just like, you don't understand what actually goes into it. See, I'm grounded in facts and reality. And here's the actual fact. Do you know how many billionaires there are in the world? The last time I Googled it, there's 3,124 billionaires in the world. It's a pretty specific and exact number, because the amount of money that goes into making $1 billion is a lot. Now, here's where it gets tricky. What about 100 million? How many centimillionaires? That's what $100 million is a centimillionaire. Once you've made $100 million, or you have $100 million net worth, you're a centimillionaire. There's about 28,000 and change centimillionaires on the planet. Okay, that's not very many. There's 8 billion people, or over 8 billion people on the planet. There's only 28,000 centimillionaires. Okay, what about ultra high net worth individuals? Do you know how many ultra high net worth individuals there are on the planet? An ultra high net worth individual is someone that has a net worth of $30 million or more. There's 700,000. Okay, so there's 700,000 people, not even a million fucking people, that have a net worth of $30 million or more. But you're talking about you want to make your first billion by 30? You know who did that? Zucks. You know who else has done that? I don't even know. Like a handful of people. You've got to look at things as the long game. And the truth is you don't even know how to spend $1 billion. You can't even grasp or wrap your head around that number. And the way I would reverse engineer what I actually need to make, or what I actually want, I would vision board and I would dream. Because I've done this exercise when I had my company. What I would do is once a year we would do this thing called a wealth day, where I would sit down and I would basically sit with the company and I would show them the power of compounding interest in terms of investing into a 401k, investing into an investment account, and what 8% over time spitting off cash flow looks like, and what it does in terms of that compounding interest when you're just doing the slow and steady wins the race method of investing. What people would be mind boggled by, number one, is how much stuff costs, because what I would do is I would sit down and I would hand them a sheet of paper and I'd say, first off, let's start, when we're looking at your goals, let's start by looking at how much everything costs and like forget what it actually costs. Like, let's just focus on, what do you want your life to look like? You want to fly private? Okay, cool. You want a G6? Do you know what that costs on a monthly basis? Do you know what your lease is? And I had this stack of paperwork that would tell people, hey, a Lamborghini Aventador or whatever this car costs, you want a Rolls Royce, this, okay, a brand new one, a lease payment's gonna be like $6,000 a month. Your insurance is gonna be maybe $2,000. You have this, whatever, all these different expenses. I would show people what it actually costs to get an oceanfront penthouse in Miami, what your monthly payment is on that sort of thing. We would map out what the expenses were. And I would say, okay, cool, now here's your vision dream life. You've got a penthouse, you've got private jet that you want. Like for me, my favorite private jet's a PC-12NG because it's a lot cheaper to operate than 550, even a G4. A G4 and a G650ER are essentially the same operating costs. I think the G4 might be a little bit higher because it's not as efficient. G650 is longer range. They're both about $3.5 million a year to run if you're running them 400 hours. If you're gonna want that as your lifestyle, you should know what that costs. That doesn't even include the acquisition costs. That's not even your loan payment. That's literally just your direct operating costs in terms of fuel and maintenance to run that plane about 400 hours a year, which is a pretty jet set lifestyle. You're talking about 8 hours a week on average. And so that would be like flying from LA to Dubai, let's say once a month, round trip, right? That's a pretty big flight. But my whole point with that is when you start mapping out like, okay, damn, my dream lifestyle is gonna cost me $100,000 a month in today's terms. So the first step is figuring out what your lifestyle is actually gonna cost, your dream lifestyle, right? Because this is, if we're focusing on your goals, like you're 20 years old right now, or you're 18 and you're watching this, or whatever it is, maybe you're 50, I don't give a f. You can start at any age and you can change your life. I would look at like, okay, what do my goals cost? Okay, my goals cost $100,000 a month. Okay, how do I make $100,000 a month? That's $1.2 million a year. How do I make $1.2 million a year passively? What does that look like? Well, then I would whip out another spreadsheet that I would show them, here's what interest looks like when you're making interest on your money. Because I would ask people, I would start this whole process by asking them, how much money do you want? How much money do you need to retire if you could have any amount of the money in the world? And people would say things like, I don't know, 100 million or $1 billion or whatever. They'd say random, or sometimes they'd say 5 million or something much more realistic where I was like, good for you. That's a really achievable number. I don't even think you realize how achievable that number is. And they'd map this out and I'd say, okay, cool. Now let's spend it. When we would go through it, they wouldn't spend any of their money. And so I'm just like, okay, well, if you're not going to spend it, maybe you don't need 100 million. Maybe you could make do with 8. And that's what would happen when I would show them the spreadsheet, because what you realize is the truth about financial freedom is if you're having to work for the money, it's not free. It's not freedom. You're not free. You have a job. Even if you're making $10 million a year, you're a high paid entrepreneur investor. If you're at the office every day and you're doing something, if you have to work for that money, it is not free. The only true like financial freedom type monies where people think of mailbox money that comes in the mail and you don't have to do anything for it is residuals when you look at any sort of passive income. But other than that, there's not a lot of passive income out there. You can build something up, like even real estate. Real estate is pitched oftentimes as like a passive investment, but it has to be actively managed. And so you either have a property manager in place, which you're going to have to communicate with that property manager every so often because there might be a big repair that's $5,000 or $10,000 or over whatever the threshold is that you set for that property manager to look at. And so it's going to cost you time to have an interaction with them. And it might be as simple as an email. But the point is you have to look at like what you're trying to create. If you want to like cars and things like that, that stuff can be cheap. But if you like fancy cars, okay, cool. Then you can work that into your budget. You want a vacation home? Cool. Work that into your budget. Like, what is that going to cost? But if you map it out at $100,000 a month or 1.2 million a year, or let's say it's $100,000 a year. So it's $8,000 a month is what you want to retire on. Doesn't matter. I don't care. Map out what stuff costs. Look at it. If you look at a $10 million nest egg spitting off 6% return, which is a very modest return. The S&P 500, when you look at what it's returned over a 10% return for the past 4 or 5 years. In some years, it missed that. We've had a few down years or flatter years than that, but on average, it's been over 10% the past 5 years. Historically, it's about 8% over the course of a 75-year period, which is a very long trajectory, and there's obviously some years where it goes down and it doesn't go up, but then it rebounds very quickly. And when you educate yourself on this stuff, you know this, and that's why you can be a smart investor that's not an emotional investor. Then you would realize, okay, a 6% return on 10 million gets you 600 grand a year. What does 600 grand a year actually look like? That's 50 grand a month. That's more than enough money to live on. And that could be a $10 million net worth between 5 properties you have that are managed by a property management company. You could have $5 million in an investment account that's spitting off that average return of 8%, and then blended together after all your expenses, that's where you get that 6% return. And so when you understand what you're aiming for, what your lifestyle is going to cost, and you're able to balance or create a number in your head of where to start, now you have your starting point, and that's where I would start. And then I would look at where I'm at today and I would say, okay, how much am I making right now? When I was 20 years old, I was not making any money. I was making 10, 20 grand a year. Just like trying different sales jobs, was not very good, didn't stick with anything. My dad was always talking at me for like not keeping a job. And I was like, Dad, you say that like it's a bad thing. Like I'm just trying different things. Try different things until you find something that you like. My dad was really successful too. So he gave me a little bit of a chip on my shoulder too. I was a spoiled rich kid growing up, but I had to work for every dime I made. Like my dad didn't help me out along the way and like just give me millions of dollars to go do whatever I wanted. He did not want to raise some punk kid, which too late, Dad, that obviously didn't work out. But seriously, I did find my way, and it was because he didn't help me. It was because he didn't enable me. And like if parents are watching this or you have kids, don't enable your kids. You might be watching this thinking, oh, I've had conversations. I'm in a mastermind group. I've had conversations with like very successful people making 6-7 figures a month, very successful people. And they'll often tell me their story and like they came from poverty or they came from nothing. And they tell me how they want to buy their kids everything. They want to buy them this. And I'm like, how old are your kids? And their kids are like 6. I'm like, oh, thank God you haven't ruined them yet. I'm like, do you want them to be happy? And they'll say, yes, of course. I would say, don't buy them a thing. Don't buy them a house. Don't buy them a car. Give them a match on their first car. When they buy their first car, if they're like, Daddy, I want a Lambo, be like, okay, cool. I'll give you a match, a dollar-to-dollar match. And they'll be like, Dad, I can't make that money. And be like, okay, then you can't get a Lambo. I don't know. Be resourceful. Go on YouTube. There's kids on YouTube making a load of money, but a lot of it's a fugazi. Don't buy into it. It's all fake. Like they're like, oh yeah, I make $1 million a month. No, you don't. Shut the up. You're just selling some bullshit course. I don't have a course for sale. Why can you trust me? Because what's my incentive? I don't have a course for sale. I'm selling you on watching this channel and like focusing and buckling down and doing something. You might be one of the selling a course. You're like, oh yeah, sell a course. That's a good idea. But I don't have any skills. Oh, I know. I'll sell a course on courses. It's ridiculous. Anyways, my whole point is that the joy is not like getting all the stuff. Like stuff has never made me happy. Getting the opportunity to do stuff or getting the opportunity to like learn along the way and grow and enjoy the actual process and find out what motivates me is always what's made me happy. And so that would be my same advice to you. And the reason it's important to prioritize happiness is because happiness creates sustainability. If you don't have a job or a career or something that you're pursuing professionally to make money that you like and enjoy, you're not going to do it because you don't enjoy it, period. And that's been something I learned the hard way because I would try something just chasing money and then I would always fizzle out. I wasn't into it, or I wasn't into it enough to actually make it successful. And one of the best pieces of advice I think I would give myself, hope I would listen to, is I wouldn't drink and I wouldn't party at all. Now, I didn't party for some of my 20s, but the reason for this is that I've done experiments in the amount of productivity I get out of being 100% sober versus, in the times when I was not sober or drinking alcohol or partying and doing stuff. You might think it doesn't affect you, but it actually does affect you. I noticed I quit one time for a week because I had a deadline. I was producing a movie. It was my first movie that I produced. It wasn't that good of a movie. That's why we made it to a few film festivals, but it wasn't like the greatest movie I ever made. That's why you've probably never heard of me. But my whole point is that when I made that movie, for me, that was a bucket list item that I wanted to do. And when I was working on it, I had basically a 3-week deadline for the premiere to get this thing edited down. When I quit drinking for that basically period of time to get everything chopped down to get the final edit in time for the premiere, I finished it a week and a half or 2 weeks early. And I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, how was I this productive just by not drinking? And after that, I just stopped drinking because I was just like, this is a waste of my life. This is a waste of my time. And I haven't had a drink since then. It's been almost a decade. And the second thing I wouldn't do, and this will come as controversial advice, especially from a realtor, is I wouldn't buy a home. And you might be saying, what? You wouldn't buy a home? No, absolutely not. Homes are actually not good investments, and I'll tell you why. Homes are non-yielding assets, meaning they don't spit off any cash flow. What I would do instead is I would buy a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, or if you're smart enough to figure out how to do a real estate syndication and buy an apartment building or something like that, I would consider buying something like that. But the reason I would get into a duplex, triplex, or fourplex is right now, if you're watching this and you have no money for your down payment, in most states, in literally every state that I know of, you can get down payment assistance where you can can come to the table with zero money down, and you can finance a duplex, triplex, or fourplex with 3.5% down. But the down payment assistance program from the state will give you a loan to cover that 3.5% down, or most of it or some of it, so that way you can come out of pocket little to no money. Now, you're still gonna have to have some money for closing costs, appraisals, things like that through that process. But here's why I would buy a fourplex or a triplex or a duplex or something like that, provided it financially made sense. And here's what I mean by financially makes sense. I would want it to cash flow or be cheaper than rent. I would want it to be some sort of a house hack. So if I bought a house, for example, and the basement was finished and I could turn that into a second unit, and I would live in the basement and then maybe rent out the upstairs, and the upstairs rent was enough to cover my mortgage, then I would do that. That's an excellent decision. And in fact, one of my employees that I coached him, like this kid, he listened to me, he looked up to me a lot, and he started with me when he was 18 years old, and he almost took a job someplace else. And I said, bro, just work for me. I was like, what are you going there for? An extra $2 an hour? Bro, I'll teach you how to get wealthy. You're a hungry kid. Like, I could tell when I was talking to him, he was a hard worker and everyone liked him because he was a hard working kid. I was like, I'll teach you about this. I'll teach you about investing, finance, whatever. I was like, just work hard for a little bit. I'll give you a raise. Okay. I'm like, sorry, it's $2 an hour more over there. Just like, this is a good opportunity. Trust me. And he listened to me. I'm so grateful he listened to me. He's grateful he listened to me too. He left my company right before I sold it, actually, when I was in the middle of the sale. He started his own business. And right now he's going through some, growing pains in terms of starting his own business as a 23-year-old kid. But when he was 20 years old, he bought his first duplex and he lived in one unit, rented out the other. He lives in a 3-bedroom portion of the unit. He's improved the whole thing, renovated the whole thing. So that's improved the operating income of it. But the one unit that he has rented out almost covers his entire mortgage. He's got 2 kids and a wife. He's Mexican. That's why he got 2 kids already at 23. And so this kid, I say kid, but he's a young adult now. So he's 24, living in this house. He's got one unit rented out, covering most of his mortgage. And he's basically living for free in the upstairs unit, which is the bigger unit, by the way. That is a game changer to your financial situation when you do not have the pressure of a mortgage because you have a second source of income. Now, this is not without its caveats, meaning like if that person stops paying rent, now you have to evict them and you have to go back to covering the mortgage. But he bought a house that he could afford. Like the mortgage is very low. He got in when interest rates were very low. They were in the 3s. Now interest rates are in the 6s. But this philosophy still applies today, and you can make these deals cash flow. And it was one of the best financial decisions he ever made for himself to just establish a foundation, because he has about $200,000 equity in that property from all the improvements, the additional square footage he's added, and the renovations he's made. And he's got that cash flow coming in that's covering his mortgage. And that is a big stress reducer, especially when now, you're a young adult and you've got 2 kids at home. That's going to be a lot of stress, and he doesn't have to worry about, trying to buy a home, because he's, instead bought a duplex that's actually cash flowing for him and making him money. And if he rented out the upstairs unit and went and bought, something different for him and his family to live in, he would be making easy $2 to $3 grand a month on that one property. And that would be a very low maintenance asset spitting off that cash flow for him. So in summary, it's really, life is simple. Don't buy stupid shit. I swear you're going to go out and buy a BMW or something dumb that you think is like flashy and cool, and it's going to get you chicks, and you're going to chase all the wrong things. And before you know it, you'll blink, 5 years of your life will go by, and you'll be in the exact same position as you were when you were 20. And you'll be thinking to yourself, oh, I just wasted time. I wasted time drinking, partying, doing all this stuff. And the truth is, it's not. I would argue that it's not a waste, because you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot about life. And there's different strokes for different folks. So some people, if you want to play it safe, you can do what I'm talking about. This is in retrospect. But if you're like me and you're kind of a rebel and you're going to do whatever you want anyways, maybe you will go buy dumb shit. Maybe you will take that, trip overseas, because that stuff is going to enrich your soul. It's going to enrich your life and your experience in a way that just like saving pennies isn't. And if you're disillusioned with the way the economy is going in the United States right now, I don't blame you. It's not a great time to buy. It's not a great time to graduate college. I definitely would not go to college, because it is the biggest waste of time if you're trying to make money. If you're trying to be a doctor or a lawyer or something, and that's your passion and you want to do that and you need that degree, great, go do it. But college is the biggest waste of time and money. It's not going to make you more money. It's going to put you in debt. You're going to pay for an education that's not actually that great. It's going to be an overly inflated education, because the education that you're going to pay 100 grand for should have probably cost 10 grand. But the reason it's so expensive is because they'll give you student loans that you don't have to get approved for. Like, how is it that you have to get approved for a house, a car, a motorcycle, anything else you want to finance and buy? You have to get approved for it. But you don't have to get approved for student loans. Why don't they want to check your credit? Well, because you don't have credit, because you're 18 years old. The whole thing is a racket. I do not believe in school. I do not believe in student loans. I believe in getting an education and educating educating yourself, and it's important to commit to being a constant, consistent, lifelong learner. But doing that through a formal education, unless you need that to be a doctor, a nurse, or something because that's your passion and that's what you're pursuing, I think it's a total waste of time unless, again, that's your passion and you need that degree to go be a doctor or do something like that and take care of sick people. And in that case, power to you, go through it, go through school. And then one thing I'll say is that if you are a first-time buyer, something that I'm doing as a realtor, and this might come as a shock, and you might be thinking, how are you making money if you're doing this, is that I am so passionate about what's going on in the economy right now in terms of it is not affordable to live. It's not affordable to buy a house. The government is gaslighting you about everything, whether it's student loans or inflation coming down. I mean, the whole thing is a racket and a scam. And the sooner you get into a piece of property or an asset that appreciates in value, like a home, where you start buying stocks or you start investing or just open your first investment account, the sooner you're going to be in a position where you're on the other side of the equation, where you are the rich getting richer because you have assets that are going up in value. Every time the government deflates the value of your dollar and therefore inflates the value of your assets, and the sooner you get on the other side of that equation, the sooner you start owning hard assets like buildings and property and businesses in the form of stocks through investment accounts, the sooner you're going to get outside of the rat race. You're going to stop being a hamster on a treadmill that's just running broke into the ground, getting nowhere in life. And the sooner you can take those steps towards financial freedom. And what I was saying is one of the things I'm doing right now, I'm in the Denver metropolitan area for first-time home buyers. I'm actually donating my commissions towards closing costs and to help people get into homes. It's a fine line on how we do this because this can actually be constituted as mortgage fraud if it's done improperly. It has to be disclosed to the lender. And you might be asking yourself, why would you do that? Why would you give your commission to a complete stranger just to make it more affordable for them to get into a home? And it's a good question, and it's a valid question because most people have a hidden agenda. And what I looked at and what I saw is, number one, this is only for first-time buyers. And so first-time buyers are only first-time buyers once. So hopefully they become a lifelong customer. There's obviously no guarantees in life. Number two, I can make money on it on YouTube. I'll talk about that with anyone that's interested, how I would make money on the transaction, because I would publicly underwrite a deal and show people how we look at a fourplex or a duplex. And that's the second part, is I'm only doing that for, people that are really interested in doing investment properties, because that's when it's a good financial purchase. If it's just a home that you're buying in today's market with interest rates, in my opinion, I'm one of the few realtors I would say that will ever tell you it's not a good time to buy. It's always a running joke with me. You ask any realtor like, oh, how's the market? Oh, it's a great time to buy. It's like, no, it's not. Like they were saying that 2022. Well, some were honest, but most of them, it's just, they're going to tell you it's a good time to buy because they want to sell you some it hasn't been a good time to buy until now. Like now we finally have sellers, like median price is down about 17%. Things are coming down in price. So it's actually a more affordable time to buy. But if you want to get into a home, or someone in the Denver market that an aspiring investor wants to get into a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, and they could benefit from that, there's a link in the description on how you can get in touch with me, or send it to one of your friends in Denver and let them know there's actually honest, nice real estate agents out there that do exist and that will help you out getting into that first-time investment property by putting those commissions towards closing. And I can show you how you can do it in a point where you almost don't have to come out of pocket with any down payment between those down payment assistance programs as well, in conjunction with using some of my commissions towards closing costs. And if you're not a first-time home buyer, we'll also do a donation of some of my commissions towards charity, and I explain how that works as well. But anyways, let me know your thoughts. Hopefully this was helpful. If you think I'm an idiot and this was, terrible advice, hey, that's fine. Let me know in the comments. But if this was eye-opening and you felt like you learned something, I'm curious to hear what you learned. I'll catch you on the next one, and there's a few videos popping up on the screen right now that YouTube thinks you should watch, so make sure you check those out.